Beyond the Gate spoilers tease that Chelsea Hamilton's world is about to fracture under the weight of family secrets, betrayal, and a shocking medical crisis that forces her to confront long-buried resentments. From the moment she hears the frantic ring of her phone in the early hours, Chelsea senses that nothing will ever be the same. The voice on the other end, her mother's trembling whisper, shatters her calm. "It's your father. He's had a stroke." In the hush that follows, she places a hand over her pounding chest, imagining her father, Bill Hamilton, alone and vulnerable in some sterile hospital wing. Memories flood in, his booming laugh at the dinner table, his stern lectures about responsibility, the way he would ruffle her hair with fierce pride. And now, in the smallest of hospital rooms, that proud man lies still, fighting for his life. The drive to the hospital is a blur of rain-slicked streets and red taillights. Chelsea grips the steering wheel, knuckles white, her mind spinning through 1,000 what-ifs. When her car finally turns into the hospital's entrance, she is barely aware of passing doctors and nurses. All that matters is reaching her father. The antiseptic scent of the corridors assaults her senses as she rushes to the ICU. There, behind a curtain, Bill is hooked to machines that beep and hiss, a grotesque symphony that underscores the fragility of human life. His hand, once so strong, lies limp on the crisp white sheet. When he opens his eyes, they cloud over with confusion and pain. Chelsea grasps his hand. It's warm but weak, as if the life force within is tethering to the machines rather than his own body. Bill's stroke was sudden, but not entirely unexpected. Chelsea had noticed subtle changes over the past year, her father's occasional forgetfulness, the way he winced when he stood up too quickly, and his stubborn refusal to follow through with doctor's appointments. Bill had always been a man of iron will and instinct honed through decades as a firefighter, rushing into danger while others fled. Yet his own body was now betraying him, and he insisted on facing recovery on his own terms. Physical therapy sessions went missed, pills went unclaimed, and the doctor's gentle urgings clashed with his lifelong habit of self-reliance. Chelsea fights the urge to scold him. She knows that beneath his gruff exterior beats a heart that fears dependence more than death itself. In the days that follow, Chelsea balances hospital visits with her own life, the legal firm where she works, friends who offer sympathy but can't grasp the depth of her turmoil, and the quiet apartment where every creak reminds her of nights spent pacing the floor. She wrestles with guilt that she is not doing enough, guilt that she resents the demands on her time, and guilt that part of her feels relief that at least the crisis is out in the open. No more tiptoeing around dinner tables to avoid triggering his anger, no more subterfuge to refill his pill organizer when he's not looking. For a fleeting moment, she admits to herself that this chaos might be the catalyst her family needs. But the calm before the storm quickly shatters when Chelsea's older sister, Naomi, returns to town. Naomi had been absent for months, off pursuing her own life in another city, buoyed by a landmark lawsuit she'd filed against their father's medical practice. The case accused him of misdiagnosis that cost a patient her mobility. For weeks, Naomi had gathered evidence and retained a high-profile attorney, convinced she was championing justice. Chelsea, however, saw nothing heroic in the lawsuit. In her eyes, Naomi had betrayed their father's trust, weaponizing legal proceedings for ambition and a bruised ego. When Naomi arrives at the hospital, hair perfectly styled, designer bag slung over her shoulder, Chelsea feels both relief and revulsion. Relief that at least someone else has come to share the burden. Revulsion that the same sister who abandoned her father in his time of need now steps into the fold with an air of superiority. Their reunion is frosty. Naomi's practiced smile never reaches her eyes, and Chelsea senses an undercurrent of judgment in every syllable Naomi utters. She compliments their father's survival but also reminds Chelsea that his long-term prognosis depends on effective medical care he'd vehemently refused. The unspoken accusation hangs between them, that Chelsea has failed to control their father's obstinacy. In the privacy of Chelsea's rented car after another draining hospital shift, the sisters finally erupt. Words spat like arrows. Chelsea hurls accusations. Naomi's lawsuit inflicted emotional trauma on their father, stirring anxiety that precipitated his stroke. If Naomi had never taken him to court, Bill would still be hale and hearty. Naomi counters with legal jargon, insisting that a doctor of Bill's stature must be held accountable for negligence. He endangered lives, she snaps, voice cracking as she slams her hand on the steering wheel, making Chelsea jolt in her seat. The rows over the lawsuit are deeper than black and white legal briefs. They cut to childhood wounds. Naomi remembers being overlooked, the younger sister coddled by Bill's protective instincts. Chelsea recalls Naomi's jealousy and cunning, traits that eventually manifested in the courtroom. Each holds a mirror to the other's unresolved grief. As tensions flare, the hospital security intervenes. Late-night corridors echo with their raised voices. A guard gently but firmly separates them, guiding each to a small security office. Under fluorescent lights, behind a plexiglass window, they face one another with exhaustion and resentment etched into their features. Chelsea's eyes redden from unshed tears. Naomi's lips tremble with defiance. The guard clears his throat and explains that such conflicts disrupt the healing environment. You're both family. You need to sort this out somewhere else. There is no immediate resolution, only the humiliating realization that their feud has become public spectacle. They leave the station in stony silence, constitutional but feeling more estranged than ever. In the days that follow, Chelsea oscillates between anger and sorrow. She visits Bill daily, often sitting by his bedside, recounting mundane details of her day as if to reassure him of normalcy. She watches the machines monitor his vitals, noting every fluctuation with a mix of scientific curiosity and helpless dread. Bill's recovery is slow and frustrating. He struggles with speech, his words slurring in ways that remind Chelsea of early childhood, when he taught her to read and pronounce new words. Now roles have reversed. She guides him through letter exercises, patient and gentle, even when he snaps that she's babbling like a teacher. At home, Chelsea, poring over her father's medical records, uncovers the depth of damage: blocked arteries, a missed angina diagnosis 6 months earlier, and a concerning pattern of skipped checkups. Each revelation sends a fresh wave of guilt through her. She chastises herself for not insisting he see a specialist sooner, for letting her own career ambitions distract her from his frailty. At the same time, she struggles to forgive Naomi. In her heart, she recognizes that her sister's lawsuit, though painful, sought truth. But the timing, on the heels of Bill's collapse, makes it impossible to disentangle motive from consequence. Naomi, meanwhile, retains a professional distance. She visits Bill with a bouquet of lilies, offers polite inquiries about his comfort, but remains guarded. Behind closed doors, her attorney delivers updates on the lawsuit, settlement demands from Bill's firm, potential countersuits, and the specter of media attention. Naomi is torn between vindication and remorse. She had hoped justice would be swift and clear-cut, but the human toll the sight of her father tethered to life support haunts her. In the sterile conference room of a downtown law office, she finds herself staring at her reflection in the glass wall, wondering whether she has become the villain in her own story. The sisters' communication deteriorates to terse text messages. Chelsea's prose is laced with exasperation. "Stop playing attorney and just be my sister." Naomi replies with legal shorthand, "I'm doing what's right. Don't get between me and the truth." Each message feels like another chasm opening between them. In the abyss of her grief, Chelsea reaches out to her childhood friend Elena, seeking solace. Over coffee in a quiet cafe, Elena listens as Chelsea recounts the hospital drama and the sibling warfare. Elena reminds her that people sometimes cope with pain by wielding power. Naomi is scared too, Elena says softly. She wants control when everything else is falling apart. Empowered by Elena's empathy, Chelsea resolves to bridge the gap. She writes a hesitant email to Naomi, offering a truce. Let's set aside our differences for Dad's sake. He needs us as family, not adversaries. Hours stretch into days with no reply. Refusing to be deterred, Chelsea calls Naomi's attorney directly, asking to meet face-to-face. The meeting is arranged in a neutral location, an oak-paneled conference room in a community center. Chelsea arrives early, nerves taut. Naomi enters with cautious eyes, flanked by her lawyer. For a moment, time slows. Then Chelsea speaks, not with accusation, but with vulnerability. She recounts her fear of losing her father, of losing her sister, of losing the idea of family she once cherished. Naomi's defense falters. Tears pool in her eyes. She admits that she never intended to harm their father, only to hold him accountable. Their conversation is raw and jagged, but under the mutual pain emerges a fragile empathy. They agree on a shared goal: Bill's recovery and emotional well-being. They plan to coordinate visits, share updates, and refrain from legal posturing in his presence. As they shake hands, the tension dissipates just enough to offer hope. Yet, even in this olive branch, the underlying issues linger. Naomi's career ambitions, Chelsea's fear of abandonment, Bill's prideful denial of weakness. They part with cautious optimism, knowing the real test lies ahead. Back at the hospital, Chelsea finds Bill awake and alert for the first time in days. His gaze lingers on her with gratitude and regret. "I'm sorry I worried you," he whispers, voice raspy. Chelsea squeezes his hand, fighting tears. "You're going to be okay. We're all here for you." Unbeknownst to Bill, Naomi stands at the doorway, flowers in hand. With a soft smile, she steps forward. Chelsea looks up, and for a heartbeat, the three of the father, daughters, united in concern, share a quiet moment of possibility. But beyond that fragile unity, the storm clouds of legal battles, buried resentments, and looming medical uncertainties still gather on the horizon, threatening to unleash another round of conflict that none of them are fully prepared to face. Chelsea inhaled the crisp morning air as she stepped onto the hospital's rear patio, the scent of dewy grass mingling with the faint hospital antiseptic that trailed off through the sliding doors. Her encounter with Naomi yesterday had been a fragile ceasefire, not a peace treaty, and the tension still curled in her chest like a thorn. But today, for Bill's sake, she let it go. She had arranged for him to move to a specialized rehabilitation center nearer to home, partly to reclaim some semblance of normalcy, partly to keep him within arm's reach when the old stubborn streak flared. She would oversee his physical therapy schedule, monitor his medication, and liaise with the nursing staff. All she needed now was Naomi to fulfill her promise of shared responsibility. Inside Bill's room, the midday light slanted through the blinds, illuminating motes floating in the air like tiny specters. Chelsea paused at the threshold, watching him complete a set of shoulder exercises under the guidance of a physical therapist. His face was drawn in concentration, sweat dampening his hairline. When he caught sight of her, a tired but genuine smile replaced his furrowed brow. "You made it," he rasped. Chelsea slid a chair beside his bed and took his hand, gently squeezing it. "Of course. I wouldn't miss this." She nodded at the therapist, who gave the signal that the session was wrapping up. Bill exhaled in relief and sank back against the pillows. That afternoon, Chelsea walked the short corridor to the administration office to finalize the transfer paperwork. She expected to see Naomi waiting there, but the chair was empty, and a terse note lay on the desk: "Running late. We'll meet you there." Chelsea's heart sank as she glanced at her watch. It was nearly 2 hours past their appointed time. Frustration bubbled up, and she had to physically restrain herself from dialing Naomi's cell. Instead, she returned to Bill's room and sat at his bedside, reading aloud from a magazine article, keeping her tone light. He chuckled at her mispronunciations and ribbed her when she stalled over a tough word. By early evening, Naomi finally appeared. She was winded from a long cab ride, hair mussed, cheeks flushed. "Sorry," she panted, setting her purse on the desk. "My attorney insisted on a phone conference." Negotiations took longer than I expected. Chelsea's jaw tightened as she watched Naomi's shoulders slump with fatigue. Underneath the fatigue, though, she glimpsed a flicker of guilt. "Dad's room," she said curtly, steering Naomi down the hall. In Bill's presence, the tension dissolved into a studied calm. They smiled at him in turn, Naomi producing a box of his favorite mint chocolates. Bill's eyes brightened. Later that night, after visiting hours ended, Chelsea and Naomi lingered in the corridor, voices low but urgent. Naomi confessed that the opposing counsel had offered a settlement and apology letter, a modest payment to cover medical expenses, and an agreement never to mention the lawsuit publicly. But the offer came with a non-disclosure clause that would prevent Bill or his practice from discussing medical errors in the future. Naomi feared this was a silencing tactic, a way to shield their father's colleagues and preserve reputations at the expense of transparency. Chelsea, however, saw it as an opportunity to draw a line under the conflict. The sisters argued until their words echoed off the glossy floor, and again, security guards were summoned. This time, not to separate them, but to escort Naomi out. They had to respect hospital rules, and it was time for visitors to go. That night, Chelsea lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the hum of the ventilator monitor still audible in her mind. She wondered whether Naomi's hardline was noble or reckless. If the lawsuit went public, it could destroy their father's reputation and cripple his practice, even if he survived. But if they accepted the gag order, what message would that send to other patients harmed by medical negligence? She realized the stakes were larger than their family drama. In the soft glow of her bedside lamp, she drafted an email to Naomi, proposing a revision: accept the apology and fee but remove the non-disclosure clause so Bill could speak honestly about his own mistakes should he choose. She clicked send at 2:13 a.m., praying Naomi would agree. The following morning, Chelsea returned to Bill's room to find him staring out the window, contemplative. He looked smaller than she remembered, diminished by the ordeal yet carrying an indefinable pride in his posture. "Natasha called," he said quietly, referring to Naomi's nickname as a child. "She spoke to me last night." Chelsea's heart stuttered at his use of Naomi's childhood namite, was the first sign of emotional thaw. "How did that go?" she asked. Bill sighed. "She's stubborn. But she's right about some things. I shouldn't cover for my mistakes." He paused and then added, "Promise me you and your sister will finish this. Right or wrong, finish it together." Chelsea blinked back tears, nodded, and pressed the intercom to call the nurse. Meanwhile, Naomi back at her apartment to read Chelsea's suggestion. She hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Memories washed over her. Tiny Chelsea perched on the kitchen counter while Bill cooked breakfast, Bill's booming laughter as Naomi climbed onto his shoulders at the county fair. She realized she'd become so focused on winning the lawsuit, she'd lost sight of what her father needed most: the freedom to own his mistakes without sacrificing his dignity. She typed a quick response: "I agree. Let's remove the NDA clause." One last push. Working in tandem, the sisters navigated the moral and legal labyrinth. Naomi drafted the amendment, and Chelsea consulted with the Rehabilitation Center's patient advocate to ensure the terms honored Bill's autonomy. Late one afternoon, they signed the revised agreement together in a lawyer's office, hands brushing briefly over the stack of papers. For a moment, they shared a quiet smile, sibling solidarity at its most fragile. Back at the Rehabilitation Center, Bill received the news over a private phone call. He listened, silent, as the lawyer explained the new language. When the call ended, Bill turned to Chelsea and Naomi, who sat on either side of his chair. "You two did this for me," he said, voice thick. "I know I've been difficult. I've always been difficult." His gaze shifted from one to the other. "Thank you for not giving up." Chelsea felt her eyes sting. Naomi reached over and clasped their father's hand. As Bill's physical therapy progressed, his mood brightened in tandem with regained strength. He began sharing stories of cases he regretted, mistakes he'd buried beneath years of professional pride. In those confessions, the family discovered a deeper intimacy. Over dinner in the center's communal room, Bill toasted his daughters. "You taught me that asking for help isn't weakness." The surrounding patients applauded, and Naomi winked at Chelsea, who felt a swell of relief. Yet the reprieve was temporary. One crisp morning, as Bill walked unassisted down the hallway using a cane, he stumbled, panic flashing in his eyes before he caught himself. Chelsea rushed to steady him, heart hammering. Doctors later confirmed a small but new transient ischemic attack, another warning of vascular fragility. The family's fragile optimism shattered. Bill was readmitted overnight, hooked once more to monitors. This time, his condition was less severe, but the message was clear. The road ahead would demand unwavering vigilance. Chelsea and Naomi, side by side in the waiting room, confronted the reality they'd been skirting. Their father's health was a chronic battle, not a one-time crisis. Chelsea's resentment of Naomi's lawsuit faded in the face of shared fear. Naomi's regret for pushing her father legally diminished into sheer determination to support his recovery. They devised a comprehensive care plan, dietary changes, a home nurse rotation, weekly therapy reviews, and regular family check-ins. They also agreed on boundaries: no more hospital showdowns, no more legal maneuvering in Bill's presence. At home, Bill adjusted to life with limitations. He returned to the family house's proud sanctuary but needed modifications: grab bars in the bathroom, a ramp at the front stoop, and meal deliveries while he built back stamina. Chelsea moved in temporarily, converting the spare bedroom into a makeshift office. Naomi visited on weekends, bringing home-cooked meals and sitting with their father for card games they used to play as kids. The atmosphere brimmed with nostalgia, warmth, and the faint hum of tension, ever lurking. But the sisters recognized that their own lives couldn't be put on hold indefinitely. Chelsea's law firm demanded her attention. A partner-track opportunity loomed. Naomi's legal reputation grew, and she feared that if her father's case became public knowledge again, it could stain her career. They met one evening in the kitchen, sipping herbal tea. "We need a long-term solution," Naomi said. Chelsea nodded. "We have to empower him to speak up for himself, to make his own decisions without us hovering." They drafted a tentative plan. Bill would attend a monthly support group for stroke survivors, build a network beyond his daughters, and take on a small advisory role at his practice rather than preside over it. As spring waned into early summer, Bill's health plateaued at a steady level. The stroke and the TIA had left him with scars visible and hidden, but he walked the garden path each morning, watering the rose bushes he'd planted decades ago. The sisters often joined him, sharing coffee and laughter, reminiscing about childhood adventures. They even planned a mini celebration for his 65th birthday, inviting friends and former colleagues. In those moments, the Hamilton household glowed with cautious hope. Yet Chelsea couldn't help noticing the faint tremor in her father's hand as he picked up a picture frame, the slight slur in his speech when he tried to recite a poem from memory. The doctors had cautioned that cognitive decline could follow, unpredictable as lightning. Chelsea confided in Naomi, "I'm terrified we're just delaying the inevitable." Naomi took her sister's hand and said, "Then let's live fully in the sandwich time we have. Let's not let fear steal today." Their resolution triggered a new chapter: family game nights, trips to the lakeshore, impromptu visits to the art museum. Bill even ventured to give a guest lecture at the local medical school on exercise and vulnerability that had once been unthinkable. Students and faculty listened raptly as he spoke candidly about the fallibility of doctors and the importance of patient advocacy. Chelsea and Naomi sat in the front row, hearts swelling with pride. In that lecture hall, as applause echoed, Chelsea saw the arc of their father's journey, from imperious authority figure to humbled survivor, from silent sufferer to outspoken mentor. And she realized that the true victory lay not in legal settlements or medical triumphs, but in the courage to accept help, to forgive, and to embrace imperfection. As the three Hamiltons left the auditorium arm in arm, the world outside glowed in golden afternoon light, uncertain, yes, but brimming with possibility.